Okay, this is your theory video on using Microsoft Excel. One difficulty is that the computer I'm working on is a Mac, and so its version of Excel is slightly different, though generally speaking they are the same. You'll see some different formatting, etc. when using a PC. So let's begin following the lab write-up, the Excel and Data Studio lab number 2 here. Formatting. So on a PC, you will see what's called the numbers box. So let's say I enter a number 25.04302 and hit enter. I'm going to click on it and I can select what type of number it is. Ordinarily, it's best to just use number so that Excel knows about it, but if you're using scientific notation or their percentages or it's a time, it can be pretty useful to select that. So this is called a number, and it's deciding already that I'm only having 2 decimal places, but if you look at these 2 buttons here, this will move the decimal, will decrease the number of decimals you're showing, and this will increase it. And you can keep going, etc., etc., going on. Most of the time we'll look for maybe 1 decimal point, but you have to be careful when you're using significant figures, because significant figures don't always go with the decimal point. Okay, now making a series of numbers, it's even easier these days in Excel. And as we tried to explain in words, it's probably easier to explain on video. So let's say I want to make a numbered list from 1 to 10. I basically start off with a 1, so I enter a 1 in this cell and hit return. And then in the next cell, I'm going to create what's basically going to be the pattern. So if I enter 2 and hit enter, then the pattern is go every 1. So if I select both of them and then click on this lower right corner, and you'll see that your cursor changes from a open cross to a closed cross, and I'll click and drag down and you'll see it's showing me the numbers I'm generating. And so I'll go to 10 and release, and there you go. You can do a similar game. Let's say I want to count from 0 to 5 every 5. I would enter 0, I'd enter 5, I'd select, click and drag over both and select both. I'd click and drag over the lower right hand corner. There's 10, 15, 20, all the way down to 45. And you can even go backwards. So I'm betting if I do this backwards, I'll go to -5 and -10. So you can do that, but not so important. So that's how you can generate just a series of numbers, which we ask you to do in the lab itself. Using functions is very interesting. You can make your own functions. Let's say these numbers, I want to multiply them all by 2. This is what is the beauty of Microsoft Excel. So if I want to use a function, I want to say this cell, basically I'm going to say this is all times 2 compared to this previous column. So what I do is I double click and I enter an equals sign. That tells Excel, oh, they're going to enter a function that's going to have some numbers but reference a cell. So I say equals 2, and multiplication is your asterisk. But then I don't want a 2 times a specific number. I want to multiply 2 times this column. So I start off on this row by saying 2 times, and I click in there. And notice now it's showing in blue C3. Those are the column and row number for this cell. And so Excel is going to say, oh, this cell is going to equal 2 times whatever is in C3. So if I hit return, it'll generate 0. But what's beautiful about Excel is I don't have to keep typing that. I can now select the cell that has the function in it, hover over the lower right corner to get this dark cross, click and drag, and it'll do that same manipulation to the whole column. So notice if you double click in there, it says it's equal to 2 times what's in C4 cell, which is 5. And then I have to hit return, double click in there, 2 times C5. So what it's done is basically just taken this function, multiplying this column by 2, and just doing it for the whole column. And that's a great way to manipulate large data sets by entering a function in once and then just doing what's called fill. This is a fill command. So if I just reverse all this, oops, here I've entered the function, hit return. There's also an easier way. If Excel sees a column here and you started playing with the first row of it, you can just double click right here and it'll fill it all in. And again, for example here, this cell is 2 times whatever's in this cell. So 2 times 35 gives you your 70, etc. So very quick and easy. Let's mess around again. Let's say +2. So I'm going to take everything in this column here and I'm going to add 2 to it. Simple enough, double click, enter your equals sign, and say 2 plus, and then click in this cell to say 2 plus whatever is in, oops, and I just made a mistake. 2 plus this cell, right? So it'll give me 2, and this should give me 7, this should give me 12, and then 17, right? And so I can click and drag down, and it'll do all that. 45 plus 2 is 47. So again, this is where Excel can really save you a lot of trouble. Now there are built-in functions, so you don't have to make up your own function all the time. In fact, there are functions, there's so many built-in functions I can't even number them all. Let's say I want to take this column and find the average of all those values. Or let's say I want to find the standard deviation. I'm just labeling them for my own sake. But here I go. I want all the numbers. I want the average of all of these numbers 1 through 10. So I double click, I enter equals, and now I'm going to start enter average because that is the name of the function. And as soon as I do it, it searches its database for all different types of averages. We want just the normal average. What it's going to give you is the function name, and then it shows, well, in parentheses, you need to have all the numbers. So you go into the parenthesis, and then you click and drag through your column you want to measure the average of. And so what this is saying is, in this cell, I want the average of the numbers from cell A3 through cell A12. And when I hit the return, it gives me 5.5, which is just the average. The standard deviation, which is basically giving you the average deviation of all your values from the average, not very useful right here, but you'll want to be doing it. I'll enter an equal sign, and then I'll enter ST, and basically, again, you come up with many different functions. I'm just going to just do this STDEV. It's a standard, it's a normal standard deviation, nothing crazy. And then again, I'm in the parentheses, and so we're going to take the standard deviation of this whole row. Click on A3 and drag it all the way down to A12. Release and hit return, and you now have the standard deviation. And hey, maybe there's too many decimal places, so let's reduce the number of decimal places to be a bit legit. And it rounds essentially up to that second decimal place. Maybe we want less, 3.0. Last is making a chart. And again, a little bit different between PC and Mac versions. I went ahead and generated a bunch of data, the time, the velocity of an object over time. And I know it's accelerating at a uniform rate. So if I want to make a chart out of this, I can go ahead and I can even select the titles for each column, but click and drag over both rows, all right? And then, and I believe this is the same for the PC version, this is your ribbon up here, and you have different tabs on the ribbon. So I believe you'll have the Insert tab, and then you'll insert right here a chart. And more often than not, we use the scatter chart, so let's select that, and it'll generate a scatter chart. Now, it went ahead and thought my title was velocity. It's not. On the PC version, there's a little plus thing over here to the right, and you have all possibilities. But You can also just, if it's already generated a title for you, I can fix that. I want velocity versus time. And so here's my data, and notice as soon as I click in there, it gives me the format chart title, and there's various things I can do to make it all pretty, but most importantly, that ain't most important. So as long as I've clicked on the chart, notice when I click off it goes away, now it's highlighted again. So add chart element. Here is where you can enter your axis titles. I'm going to go ahead and do my primary horizontal. This should be time. And I want to include a unit of seconds. I'm going to go back up here and select axis title primary vertical. That's this axis. And it is velocity in meters per second. All right, so I have that good, and usually it plots it nicely so that your data points are scattered throughout the chart. You're welcome to go get rid of this little part. If you double click on the axis, you'll get a format axis dialog box, and you can go ahead and decrease. Maybe I want my maximum of that axis to be 10. So if I change it, it might not be happy, but I'll hit return and it should fix that up. And there are many other manipulations you can do on your axis. You can change the alignment of the numbers. You can have it you can have it change the number of numbers in there. It's saying the major grid lines are 2. I can change it to 1 if I like, right? So to include all those values. So we've got our chart. We have a title. We have a title and scale for our axes with units. And last thing is a trend line. So probably the easiest way I've found, and again on your PC version there should be a little dialog box to the right of your chart, and I believe trend line is on there, but I believe you can right click on any of your data points and hit add trend line, and that will open up a trend line dialog box here. It automatically sees I want a linear, so it went ahead and did it for myself, but make sure you do that. And then you can also, and most importantly, display equation on chart. And so that's what it's done, right? And it always assumes the y is the vertical axis and the x is the horizontal axis. So it's saying I have a slope of 3, which turns out to be my acceleration once we learned physics, and 2 means it's my initial velocity. So my velocity at t equals 0 is 2. All right, so that ends the Excel video. Look out for other videos to this lab.